At the beginning of the story, we see a prison in Siberia where dozens of German soldiers were lined up. After World War II ended, Russia had captured many German soldiers and forced them to work day and night in coal mines. Although the prison's security was not very tight, no one ever tried to escape, because all around the prison there was nothing but endless snow. The nearest human settlement was about 14,000 kilometers away. Even if someone managed to escape, the freezing Siberian cold would ensure their death. The prison stood isolated, surrounded by thousands of kilometers of snow and ice, so the idea of escaping never crossed anyone's mind. But among these prisoners was one man with an exceptionally sharp mind, and he desperately wanted to escape to reunite with his wife and daughter. His name was Klemen Feierl, and he had been sentenced to 25 years in this prison. Klemen couldn't bear the thought of spending half his life behind bars. He was determined to escape no matter what. Luckily, one day, Klemen got his chance. He slipped into a coal transport train and managed to escape the prison. When he looked up at the open sky and saw the stars, he was overwhelmed with joy. But that joy didn't last long. After traveling for a while, the train suddenly stopped. When Klemen peeked outside, he saw a Russian soldier pointing a gun straight at him. Unfortunately, Klemen was caught and punished for trying to escape. He was thrown into an open-air cell, exposed to the freezing cold. It was bitterly cold, and the nighttime rain made things even worse. He was kept in that open cell not for a few hours, but for 2 whole days. On the morning of the second day, the prison warden came to see him. Without torturing him, the warden simply said, "Your friends are eagerly waiting for you." When Klemen was brought before his fellow prisoners, they were standing there holding sticks and clubs. They were furious. Because of Klemen's escape attempt, all of them had been punished and kept hungry for 2 days. Now Klemen understood what the warden had meant. As soon as they saw him, the prisoners attacked him brutally. They beat him so severely that he had to be admitted to the prison hospital. The prison doctor, also a German prisoner, treated him. When Klemen regained consciousness, he told the doctor he wanted to try escaping again and needed his help. The doctor was amazed at Klemen's courage. How could someone still dream of escape after suffering so much? He tried to reason with him. Escaping from this prison alive is impossible. Even if you make it out, the freezing cold will kill you. But then he admitted the harsh truth. If you don't escape, you'll still die here. The coal mines are filled with carbon, and breathing it every day will eventually give you cancer. So the doctor told Klemen, "You must try one last time." He gave Klemen all his warm clothes, boots, and supplies. He also revealed that the Russian soldiers often hid their food near the railway lines. Finally, he handed Klemen a gun for protection. The doctor had gathered all this equipment earlier for his own escape. But a week ago, he had learned that he was dying of cancer and had only about a month left to live. Before Klemen left, the doctor gave him a small lunchbox and said, "If you survive, please deliver this to my family and tell them I'm no longer alive." That night, under the cover of darkness, Klemen escaped again, this time on foot instead of by train. He walked all night and kept going through the morning, terrified that Russian soldiers might be tracking him. When the warden discovered the escape the next morning, he immediately rushed to interrogate the doctor, but by the time he arrived, the doctor had already taken his own life. He knew the warden would torture him to death once he learned Klemen had escaped again. The warden then ordered several Russian soldiers to track Klemen down and bring him back alive. But after days of searching, there was still no sign of him. Klemen's luck was that snowfall had begun, erasing his footprints and making the search impossible. Everyone assumed he must have frozen to death, but the warden refused to believe it. He knew Klemen was strong and would never give up easily. Meanwhile, Klemen was pushing forward through the blizzard with unbreakable determination. 9 days after escaping, he suddenly heard dogs barking in the distance. When he turned around, he saw a sled approaching him. Before he could react, the sled was right in front of him. And then suddenly, he woke up. It had all been a dream. Klemen had been walking for 9 days straight. His food was gone and hunger and exhaustion had left him barely able to move. But he still didn't give up. Eventually, his body gave out and he collapsed unconscious from hunger. Hours later, when he woke up, he heard a strange sound nearby and saw a seal. His eyes lit up. Quickly, he grabbed his gun and tried to aim, but his weak hands trembled. He missed, and the seal fled. That was his first real hope for survival in days, and he couldn't let it slip away. He ran after it, but as he did, the ice cracked beneath him and he fell into the freezing water, injuring his leg. Still, wounded and cold, he refused to stop. He kept chasing the seal until it hid behind a rock. He moved closer and finally got another shot. And this time, the bullet hit. Overjoyed, Klemen shouted with relief. He finally had food. After many days, he ate his fill and regained strength to continue. As the endless journey went on, Klemen was completely alone, surrounded only by snow. In that emptiness, he could have lost his mind. So he kept talking to himself, saying positive things to stay motivated. He also checked his compass constantly to ensure he didn't lose direction in the white wilderness. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. After walking continuously for 2 months, Klemen finally saw something extraordinary, a small tree in the middle of the snowfield. Overwhelmed with emotion, he ran toward it and hugged it tightly. That tiny tree was a sign, proof that he had finally crossed the endless snowfield. Ahead of him lay the forest, and just as he had hoped, a little further ahead the trees began to appear. Now the forest was about to begin. The endless snow was finally coming to an end. Klemen was overjoyed to see trees again. He gathered some wood, lit a fire, and for the first time in months, he slept peacefully. But whether the next day would bring him peace or not, no one knew. Meanwhile, we see the warden who was still determined to find Klemen. He ordered his search party to look for him within a 500-kilometer radius. On the other side, Klemen was moving through the forest when suddenly a violent snowstorm struck. The storm was so strong that even massive trees were being uprooted and crashing to the ground. As Klemen tried to push forward, one of the huge trees fell directly on him. Fortunately, that evening, 2 men passing through the area, gold prospectors, saw Klemen and managed to save his life just in time. After that, the 3 of them continued their journey together. After traveling for several days, they finally made it out of the snowy wilderness. Along the way, they reached a river. To cross it, they built a small wooden raft. As they floated across, they started talking and sharing childhood stories. But suddenly, the river's current grew stronger, and the raft spun out of control. One of the men lost his balance and fell into the freezing water. He couldn't swim and began to drown. Seeing this, Klemen immediately jumped into the river and, after a desperate struggle, pulled the man safely to shore. However, their third companion, driven by greed, left them behind, assuming both would drown. He even took all the gold they had collected. A little later, when Klemen and the rescued man reached their tent, that man was furious with the greedy companion who had abandoned them. When he finally saw him again, he shot him dead. After that, Klemen and the surviving man gathered their supplies and continued their journey. For months they walked, hoping to eventually find a human settlement. But soon winter returned, and the entire forest was once again covered in a thick white blanket of snow. The man was carrying heavy supplies, which made it hard for him to walk through the snow. Seeing this, Klemen tried to help lighten his load and said, "Let me carry some of it for you." But suspicion crept into the man's mind. He thought Klemen was trying to steal his gold. In anger, he attacked Klemen and pushed him down a slope, knocking him unconscious. When Klemen regained consciousness some time later, he saw a pack of wolves approaching. Terrified, he began to climb a tree to save himself, but as he climbed, one wolf grabbed his leg. The tree was weak and snapped in half, sending Klemen crashing to the ground. He thought it was the end, that death had finally caught up to him. But suddenly, the sound of gunfire echoed through the forest. Klemen opened his eyes and saw several wolves lying dead, the rest fleeing in fear. Hunters from the nearby area had arrived just in time and saved his life. They took Klemen back to their village, where the villagers nursed him back to health. After years of struggle, Klemen had finally reached civilization. Seeing people again filled him with overwhelming joy. He stayed in the village for several days, and the villagers took great care of him. Then one day, a letter arrived in the village from none other than the warden himself. It stated that a German soldier had escaped from a Russian prison, and anyone found sheltering him would be branded a traitor. Reluctantly, Klemen realized he had to leave. If he stayed, the villagers would suffer punishment because of him. Before he left, the kind villagers gave him food supplies and a hunting dog to accompany him. Now, Klemen was no longer alone. The dog became his loyal companion as they continued their long journey. After traveling for several days, they came across a lumber mill. The dog, searching for food, ran toward it, and Klemen followed him inside. The workers there recognized Klemen as the escaped prisoner and took him to the mill owner. Klemen told the owner his entire story. Everyone there was moved by his courage and struggle. They gave him food and arranged for him to board a train bound for Germany. Klemen was overjoyed. He was finally on his way home. But what he didn't know was that the mill owner had secretly informed the warden about him. Now, the warden and his soldiers were waiting for Klemen at the train station. Before the train arrived, Klemen saw the Russian soldiers from a distance. Realizing the danger, he quickly jumped off the train and ran. The soldiers spotted him and began to chase. Klemen sprinted across the tracks, but suddenly, out of nowhere, the warden appeared right in front of him. His heart sank. It seemed that all his years of struggle were about to go to waste. Before the warden could capture him, Klemen's dog attacked the warden, biting his arm. This gave Klemen a chance to escape once again. He ran with every ounce of strength left in his body, but then came the sound of gunfire. When he turned back, he saw his dog lying lifeless on the ground. Tears filled Klemen's eyes, but he didn't stop. He ran harder than ever. He climbed up onto a bridge and leapt onto a passing train below, disappearing once more out of the warden's grasp. Time passed. Days turned into months, months into years. Klemen kept moving forward. By now, it was 1952. 7 years had passed since his escape from the Siberian prison. He was in Central Asia, wandering through a village fair. He saw different stalls selling food, and though he longed to eat, he had no money. With a heavy heart, he walked away. Then he noticed 2 young girls selling pancakes. Klemen wanted one so badly, but his pockets were empty. Disappointed, he began to walk away again. But one of the girls felt pity for him. She broke off a piece of pancake and handed it to him. At first, Klemen hesitated, but then he smiled, thanked the girls, and ate it gratefully. An older man standing nearby had witnessed this moment. Later, Klemen went into a church, and the man followed him inside. That man had once been a prisoner himself. Instead of turning Klemen over to the police, he decided to help him. He took Klemen to his home, where Klemen shaved for the first time in years and began to look like his old self again. The man then gave him a new passport, allowing him to cross the Russian border and return to Germany. Before leaving, Klemen thanked him deeply and set off toward the border. A few weeks later, he finally reached the Russian border. He presented his passport to the guard, terrified that he might be recognized or the fake document discovered. But by sheer luck, nothing went wrong. The guard glanced at the passport, nodded, and waved him through. Klemen could barely contain his joy. He smiled uncontrollably. He was finally free. He reached the bridge that separated Russia from Germany. Just a few more steps, and he would be home. But halfway across, a blinding light shone in his eyes. When he looked up, he saw the warden standing before him. Klemen turned around and realized he was still on Russian soil. That meant the warden still had the power to arrest him. His heart sank. Years of struggle, all of it, seemed to have been for nothing. But then, something completely unexpected happened. The warden stepped aside and let Klemen pass. At first, Klemen couldn't believe it. Slowly, he gathered courage and began to walk forward. The warden, watching him go, said softly, "This fight was only between two soldiers, you and me, and you've won. Go, live your life." Finally, Klemen crossed the border and stepped onto German soil, his homeland. He soon reached near his old home, where he saw his wife and daughter. A little later, as they headed to church, Klemen quietly followed them inside. His daughter had always believed that one day her father would return. When she turned around and saw him, she instantly recognized him and ran into his arms. After so many years, Klemen's wife was overwhelmed with happiness to see her husband alive. The three of them embraced tightly, reunited at last. And with that, this true story came to an end. We hope you liked today's story.